on the. Okay. So this is our brain health and wellness class, gardening after brain injury. And we are here with Kyrstin Szewczyk. And she is an occupational therapist, and she's going to be providing us some strategies for fatigue management and adaptive tools to help us continue to garden after brain injury. Kyrstin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh, maybe I will need you to flip through because I like can't do that. Oh, maybe did I do that or you? Okay.
That
all
was
right.
you.
Okay, I think clicking on it works. All right, so welcome. You already said I'm an OT. I'm also a gardener. And I'm currently, for the past year, I've been on a 9-acre homestead. So we have a big garden. We have ducks and chickens, which are super fun. We have a rabbit, great poop for the garden, barn cats, and red wiggler worms. That's our new fun thing for composting. And then, so normally, why would you have a gardening class in, late summer? It's actually a really good time to start a fall garden. So, if you look up your first average frost date, then it will tell you, when that first frost is going to come, and that kills some plants. It actually, will help kale. Like kale is sweeter after a frost. So it's okay to, keep growing after a frost, but it helps to know. And then you can just look at if you have a seed packet, and you can count backwards, if it says 45 days, that the latest you could plant it is 45 days before that first frost. But actually, you probably have more than that right now, but you want to do it now because you want that longer day and everything. So to set yourself up for success, like today is awesome to plant or tomorrow. Anyway, there's a picture on here of my family. We just got some cute family photos, so how to throw those in. And then I have some memes and stuff throughout here that I have references linked for those, but they're just for fun. Let's see. Okay, so why garden? It's definitely a whole body workout, right? A lot of times you have to bend down, you are picking things up, all of that. So it's a great workout, but it's also getting you outside. It's getting you just active, and it's a fun activity. It can actually help with your sleep. So if you're out in the morning and you have that real sunshine on you, that helps with your circadian rhythm. So it's going to help you to fall asleep at night, especially since you've been active, right? So it just helps, and it helps get you out of bed maybe in the morning too. If you don't have, I know I'm not working very much right now, and so I don't usually have something to get to first thing in the morning. But between the garden and the chickens, I'm just like, okay, I got to get out there. So it gets me moving first thing. Sensory, you get all the sensory stimulus. So you're out there, you feel the wind, you can feel the leaves, you can see things, smell flowers or just the plants. Like I love tomato plant smell or basil, all of that. So it's great. You get all your senses involved, which is great after a brain injury, and for anybody. And then of course, gardening is cheaper than therapy, and you get tomatoes. So, you get the bending and everything, the lifting, you get just that mental health component of being outside and seeing something grow. It's not instead of therapy, but it's a great addition. And then of course, a reason to garden is you get a harvest. Even if you're just growing one bay leaf plant, you can then use that in your soup, so you can you can grow that and use it, and it's nice and tasty, especially when you can make that soil really good and it's nice and fresh. You can, like this morning I went out and I got cilantro, and I used it in my eggs, and so it's as fresh as can be. So it's good reasons to garden. It's worth all the effort. So sorry if I'm going too fast. I talk way too fast sometimes. Okay. So what is a garden? Anything, honestly. So you can have one little potted plant. You can have a huge garden. So there's a picture of my 4-year-old, and he's got his there's a metal truck, and he has what are those called? Succulents in there. So, basically zero care. They stay alive pretty well inside. So that can be your garden if that's what you want. Or, I've got I think it's 20 beds in that picture of zucchini and tomatoes and flowers and all sorts of stuff out there in the other picture. So it's whatever scale. I will say definitely if you haven't been gardening either recently or since an injury, you don't want to start with huge because it gets overwhelming fast. It's kind of easy to plant the seeds and you're like, oh, it takes me 10 minutes to plant a packet of seeds, but then there's caring for them all. There's watering and weeding and all of that. So and even harvesting takes time if you plant a lot. So it's just something you don't want to overwhelm yourself. I mean, I'm saying this, but I buy too many seeds every single year. But, you want to make it so you're setting yourself up for success. So not planting too much. And if it was easy, you can always plant more next year. So how can issues from brain injury be a problem? You're going to know that better than me if you've had an injury. But just kind of, I put this picture of I think he was like 4-month-old at the time, next to the garden beds, because that was my limitation last year, was trying to garden with 3 little kids, including a baby who, couldn't sit up yet. So it was, it's hard to do some things that's, like I said, worth it. But some of the issues that can come up is remembering to do things, right? So remembering when you're supposed to plant something, remembering to water, remembering when to go out and thin something. So if you plant a bunch of carrots, they're these tiny seeds, and then you have to thin them, or all you're going to get is little carrot tops. You're not, none of the carrots are going to grow if you didn't leave room. So things like that. I mean, I've done all of those things and forgotten them, and most gardeners have. So if you do forget, don't be too hard on yourself. I know that can happen, especially if you do have memory issues. You can be like, oh, it's because of that. Yeah, it might be, but also you're a human being, and so it happens. So that's something that there's some tips later on here. I think that's next. So finding the energy to garden, that's also can be an issue. And of course, finding the time, that's a whole thing for everybody as well. But we're going to talk about the energy portion. Also, just thinking about balance. So if you're on grass, hills, if you have balance issues, that can be hard. So just being careful. And then also thinking about narrow, like how narrow you have to walk. So if you have difficulty with balance and you plant plants too close to each other, or beds, like whole garden beds too close, then your feet might need to be like this, trying to get through as you're trying to not break off your, tomatoes as you're walking through, as those plants get really big. So what can help is to look up, what size that plant is supposed to get to, unless, it might just say on the packet, some of them do, if you buy seeds, but just thinking about that in advance. And if you're putting beds up, just really, if you have the space to, have a wide aisle between them, it always feels hard if you're trying to plant a bunch, to leave a bunch of space, but it's going to be helpful, including for that energy conservation and lifting part. Like if you can fit a wheelbarrow in, if you need that, that sort of thing. It just helps to give space. Okay, so vestibular changes. So if you get dizzy, especially if you get dizzy going up and down. So like when I'm planting, a lot of times I'm leaning over, putting the seed in, popping up, stepping over, leaning over again, putting another seed in. that would be really hard if I had any sort of vestibular issues. So that's just something to think about. Maybe you have no problems getting up and down, but you need to take extra time to do it. Or maybe I'll show you a kneeler later on where, you know, you can flip it over and sit on it, or you can sit on a 5-gallon bucket or something like that, where that way you're staying down for longer without putting a lot of stress on your body. So that way you're not changing that position so many times. And then of course there can be many other issues, right? The brain affects the whole body. So it just depends on, you know, each individual. And especially since there can be other injuries, of course, that happen, you know, to everybody. So if you have, you know, other difficulties, back pain, things like that, that can all affect gardening. So today, though, we can't talk about absolutely everything. So we're going to try to focus on the memory strategies and fatigue management. And then, you know, there's some other assistive technology that I have a slide on. I don't know how much time we'll have for that slide, but it's there. And then normally I do questions at the end. I know there's an issue with the link, but I also have my email in there. So if you're not here today or even if you are and you have a question, you'll be able to email me. So let's get to memory strategies. So planting, so that's like being able to plant the seeds, the starts, you know, how do you remember to do that part? So having some sort of calendar is helpful anyway, right? For doctor's appointments, things like that. But you know, whatever you use, paper, electronic, you know, go with that. Don't create a whole separate new calendar to try to remember to check. Just use whatever system you have, and put that in there. So if you're planting a couple things, you can just write in there, you know, plant basil seeds, you know, and then you could write in later, or for later you could plant or write down, you know, to check the germination. So check when the little seeds turn into sprouts, or if it's a plant on its own, maybe you write down, you know, in a week or two to chop off the top. You know, you'll have to look up all the care on whatever plant you're doing, but just to put those in the calendar so that you can remember. And then also for harvesting, which I put that a little bit later too. So one thing to know is that especially if you're doing a lot of things, or you know, even four plants or something, it can take a while to write it down if you're trying to count the days. So something that I started doing is asking Google, you know, how many days, or what date is, you know, 45 days from now, and you can, you know, it will pop up. So or how many weeks before, you know, that first frost date, or after the last frost date. So you can let Google do the math for you so that you're not going, okay, I have to count 45 days on the calendar. And then another memory strategy is just using the resources that are out there. So there's the Tilth Alliance Maritime Northwest Garden Guide. That's all typed out there. So that is a book that has, it's locally done. They're in Seattle, and yeah, I think Seattle mostly. But they have a month by month of what plants to plant. So, and they have like a indoor section and outdoor. So it's a little overwhelming. If you only have, you know, a few plants, I wouldn't get the book. But if you are doing a lot, then it would be worth it. But just otherwise, when you're looking at that list, you're like, oh my goodness, there's, you know, dozens of things listed here. So that is just a resource that's out there. So that way it can tell you, you know, roughly like, okay, the month of June, what would you be planting? So you don't have to do all the research on your own. The other one is the Farmer's Almanac, which there's a link here. It's almanac.com. And you can find a planting calendar on there for Washington. And so you can pull up that, and actually, I don't know. You can, it's a little cumbersome, but you can delete the plants that you aren't going to plant. And so then you can print off a less overwhelming list. Like when you go to print the list, you can like click into the different plants and just backspace and it will just delete it. So yeah, it does take a few minutes, but it's worth it, especially if you plant, whoops, I don't know how to go backwards, but but if you plant the same things, that could be helpful. Does this go back? Because I think there was one more section. Are you able to?
I don't
Maybe.
have control. So
Okay.
I think if you look at the slides on the side there and click on the particular one you want to go back to, it should take you back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on like a different view, I think.
Or try to use the arrow.
Use the arrow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you. For some reason that didn't work
Awesome.
before when I was trying to go forward. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this way you can see the picture of so organizing is another way to remember what to plant. So if you have a few things that you're wanting to do, just using an envelope, you could do like just a regular, mail envelope or like a manila bigger envelope, or you could do a shoebox. But just to put in like, okay, these are going to go in April, so broccoli, things like that, kale that want the cooler weather. And then these are the things that are going to go in June, like basil, tomatoes, whatever your warmer weather plants. So that way you're not trying to sift through things and remember, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't plant that one yet. It's still in the box. So another way, if you have a lot of seeds, is you can get like a big photo box like I have in the picture. And then that way what you can do is, again, put it in there by, earlier season, later season, that sort of thing. But you can take the individual photo boxes out and take them out into the garden with you. So, because they're plastic, so they're not going to get, ruined from the wetness. So it's just kind of nice for bringing down the overwhelm, but also, again, that memory piece of, if it's still in that box, then you haven't planted it yet, right? So then once you have planted it, then you want to put it in another box. So if you're wanting to plant some later, then you could put it in like let's say carrots. If you wanted to plant some early on and then you wanted to plant some later in the summer, then you could put it in like the June or July box, that sort of thing. So just try to think about how you can organize things to help you remember, what to plant and also what you have planted. So that way you don't end up with 5,000 zucchini plants and no carrots, and then let's see. So labeling plants, you might think you'll remember, but nobody ever does. You plant something, you're like, I'll remember I planted that there. And then, a month later, you see these little sprouts coming out and you're like, I wonder what that is. So, or, if you try two different types of tomato, like cherry tomato and aroma, they all look the same in the beginning, or at least to me. So if you label them, then you'll at least, remember kind of what they are so that what works well for you, so it helps to label them. And then also for memory, you can so you use the seed packet right in the beginning, if that's the way you're doing things. And so then some of the seed packets will say, plant this width and this depth and all of that. So that's great. But once you planted those seeds, you might put that seed packet, like I said, in a different spot, right? Different envelope or whatever. So then when you're out there later, you're like, oh, what was I supposed to thin it to? That's hard, because then it's like, I don't remember if it was supposed to be 2 inches, 3 inches, or if I was supposed to wait till it's 4 inches tall or whatever. There's different instructions. So one thing that you can do is write down on a flashcard, what, once you plant something, what's the care. So, when this plant, you want to write down the name of the plant and then just what the seed care is, whether you find that online or on that seed packet. There we go. Just so that you can have that available. Otherwise, it's hard to remember all that. So also memory, just thinking about ongoing care, not just planting. It helps to just check on things every day. It doesn't mean that you're going to do anything with it, especially if it's just a couple plants, and they do take time to grow and everything. So you might not be doing anything, but it's getting into that routine. And the easiest way is to stack that habit with another one. So let's say, like, just if you think about, when you brush your teeth, if you floss right after, those are two habits that are put together so that you remember to do, because you remember to do one most of the time, then you'll remember to do the other. So maybe it's with your coffee, because if you're thinking about the morning, or, whatever your morning routine is, getting out a box of cereal. So you might put, a sticky note on your cereal box that's like, okay, go check the plants, or, whether that's in the other room or out in your garden, or on your, deck. So just putting some sort of reminder, that you're going to see that, and then you'll get into the habit of that, of checking every day. And so that way you're seeing maybe when something has sprouted, or when you need to transplant it, when it's dry and you need to water it, when you see weeds come up. Like there's little things that are going to come up, but if you're checking it every day, it's not going to be as big of a deal. So then, let's see. So what are some other ways? So there's a reminders app on the phone, there's handwritten lists that you can, whatever your style is going to be best to just stick with that. Like if you like paper, great. If you like apps, great, but just to write things down, because otherwise, as you're going through, like when you see it, great, you might not have time to work on it, because, you might see that, oh, there's some weeds popping up, but I have to get to work. So, you just might not have time to work on it right then. But if you just put it on your to-do list, or if you put it in your reminders app, that sort of thing, or in your calendar, like, hey, I know that I'll have time on Saturday to weed. So then you just put it in your calendar, like, weed your garden bed. Alarms, I try not to use alarms except for really important things. So if that's something that you want to do, you could set an alarm every morning to check on your plants, something like that. But personally, I try to reserve that for, more more urgent things, because if you don't check on your garden every day, it's probably going to be okay, if you wait a few days. And then also, so if you, this can kind of go with everything. If you have this huge list of things that you're trying to do, it helps to just pick out a few of those things, during your day, to not get overwhelmed, and to actually remember to do them, versus if you pull out your list and it has 50 items on it, it's like, okay, I'm just going to look around and see what needs to be done instead. Right. So, yeah, it just helps to have just a few things written down, of the top priority. So then automation, so that really helps with memory. So the picture here, it has the garden bed, and then it has drip line in there. So we put in drip line this summer, and it's been awesome, because we do not have to remember to water, because we have the drip line attached to a timer. So the timer goes off twice a day, and it waters morning, evening. So I don't have to remember anything. It does take effort and some cost. It's not hugely expensive, because it's just little plastic pieces, but it does add up. So it's just something to think about. If you're able to do that, it does help with memory and energy management. And plus, just kind of the nice part is the plants grow really well, because you're not over underwatering it usually. So then it's just it's more rewarding to me anyway. So the automation, what was I say? Oh, the so it doesn't have to be, I have them in the beds. It doesn't have to be in the beds. You can do them in planters as well. So I have not done that, but there are people on YouTube and all of that have done that, because you have to go up more, with the planter. But I think most people are going to have enough pressure from their hose to be able to do that, no problem. So you can do it. And same with drip line. There's all sorts of things online where you can find instructions for how to do that. It looks really intimidating until you're out there doing it. It's not bad at all. And there's wiggle room. There's like little plugs you can put in if you mess up and put a hole in the wrong place. There's you can cut an entire piece off and then stick on another one. So like, don't stress out about it. It's not as complicated as it looks. Okay, so mental rehearsal. That's just a cognitive strategy. So one thing I've heard from some folks is like, okay, I had my sticky note that said, go check on the plants in the spare bedroom. And the gal I'm thinking of, she said that as soon as she left that room, like she had that by her breakfast stuff, as soon as she left the room, it was gone. She just did not remember what she was headed off to do. So just one thing that can help is just to say it either out loud or just in your head over and over. So, as you're walking out of the room, check on plants, until you get there. So that's just one strategy to help keep that piece of information in your mind. Of course, just like everything else, you can, if you have others in your life that can help remind you of things, that's great. Whether it's a spouse or roommate, friend, even just the reminder of if you know somebody else that's gardening, it can be fun, if they're saying like, oh, I started picking my tomatoes, and they send you that message, then it's a good reminder to you like, oh yeah, I should go check on my tomatoes. So it helps to have a support system, and it's more fun to me anyway. It's more fun to be talking to other people about gardening. Let's see, ongoing care. So I just wanted to give an example of a checklist that might help. So when you are going to check on your plants, it might be that, you just look at the plant and you without any sort of checklist, you can know what you need to do. If you do have a harder time with that memory piece or the organization piece, it could help to just have a little list or a sticky note, right by your plants that says, okay, check the soil. So you just can stick your finger in the soil and go, see if any clumps on your finger or if it's really dry. So whether you need to water it. And then, you could write down, check for sprouts. So if you've planted seeds before with that clear cover on the top, you want to remove that cover once you actually see green. So, that'd be something to check for if that's something that you're doing. And then checking the roots, or is the plant getting so big that you need to change it to a larger pot. So those would just be, if you had that on a checklist, you could just kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, I need to check the roots. And then also, even if you have one plant, you could have like a weekly rotation if you wanted to, where you remember, okay, on Monday, I'm going to fertilize. And I don't like to look at a ton of lists because I have a big to-do list and that sort of thing. So for me, if I can memorize something, it's nice. So yeah, Manure Monday is what I use. So that is when I fertilize. Transplant Tuesday, so look at the roots and see, do you need to pot up, that sort of thing. So Weeding Wednesday. Because sometimes, you only have so much time in the day. So maybe you notice during your daily check, like, oh, I do need to weed. But then you just don't have time that day. It can help to think like, okay, on Wednesday, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do, the potting up at the same time. I'm not going to transplant things because that's too much to do in one morning. So then you just know, like, this is my dedicated day for that. So it's just something that if that works for you, awesome. All right. So we talked about the watering automation. And then so for weeding, mulch can do great things for you. It helps keep the water in the ground as well. If you use wood chips or plastic. something like that. I mean, there's lots of information online. So we got chip drops, so that's why we have wood chips everywhere. But you can see in the garden bed, there's wood chips over the top with my drip line. And so that just makes it so the water stays there, but also the weeds grow a lot more slowly. So there is weeding to do still. It's not a miracle, but it's just way less. And also it helps with the visual part. So if you're looking at a bunch of small plants and not sure what all of them are, especially if you haven't been gardening for very long, then, they all kind of look the same in the beginning. So it can just help with that visual of like, well, I have wood chips there. I'm not trying to grow anything in that spot. Whereas I have my little circle of bare ground, like that's where I'm trying to grow that tomato plant. So yeah, it can help with the visual and for quick, weeding. And then also if you have ground to plant in, that means that you're not going to have to water as often. So just so there's more and fertilize as often. So it's just taking away those the frequency of those tasks. So then you don't have to remember them as often. And it's good for your energy management as well, to not have to do things as often. So harvesting, it's a little bit easier, right? If you go out and you see a bright red tomato, or you see your leafy greens, you can see like, okay, that's it's ready to harvest. But if you're pretty busy, or if you just don't have the ability to get out there as often, then it can help to put it on the calendar, to just say to check on it. So it's not going to be ready exactly when it says it's going to be ready most of the time. Like if the seed packet says 65 days, that's from when the plant is in there. Like if you do a transplant. So you check it in 65-ish days, but you might need to put another calendar reminder in if you're like, it's not ready yet. And then we already talked about routine. And another memory strategy, or two of them, are keeping a journal. So remembering next year what you liked, what worked well, things like that, is really helpful. So if you planted, a certain type of bean, like a green bean, and didn't like it, you might not remember the name of it, right? Because it was a green bean. And so you might not remember that because you picked it up from the store, too. So you don't have like a record of what it was. So then the next year, you don't know to try a different green bean. So just writing down, like what type you liked or didn't like is helpful. And how many plants, maybe you had 10 zucchini plants because that sounded awesome, but then it took up your whole garden space, and then you got way too many zucchini. So then knowing that it's like, okay, probably 1 or 2 plants would have worked fine for me. So just jotting that down for the next year. And then also just location. So where did you plant something? Because maybe it did really well there, or maybe it had a lot of pests, so you want to move it to a different spot, if you have a different spot to plant it in. So it just, it helps to write it down, because as much as you remember in the moment, it's months and months until you plant it again, probably. And then another strategy is to put a little harvest basket or bowl, just something that's going to remind you that you want to go out and pick your food. Just put it somewhere where you're going to see it on the counter or wherever. So then that can help trigger that of like, okay, yeah, this morning I was going to go pick berries, because in the morning, it's the best time to pick a lot of things because it's sweeter. So if you've ever picked lettuce or berries in the afternoon when it's hotter, it's just not as sweet. So it helps, because if you don't remember and then you don't want to pick it in the heat, both because it's not as sweet and also because then it's really hot, at least this week. So if that's the case, then then if you don't remember the next morning, and then the next morning, it's like all of a sudden your berries are wilting and everything like that. So it just helps, and that might be a time to set an alarm, right? Just if you're like, okay, this is actually a little urgent, because you want to enjoy the harvest, right? Because you've worked so hard to get there. Okay, so managing fatigue. I liked this one. Dirt tired, a condition that occurs after spending all day in the garden. So, all right. So when you're planting, or transplanting, it does help to plant less plants, like I mentioned before. If you add too many, it is a lot of care over time. And also, unless you know how to take care of them all, you might be looking things up. And so then it just takes that much more energy and thought, to take care of them. So it is helpful to just plant less. And then plant more perennials. So if they come back year after year, then you don't have to keep planting them. So that's one less thing to do. So then you can just spend that energy that you have on taking care of those plants and harvesting from them, but not the planting and kind of babying them in the beginning, like making sure those seeds stay really moist, with a lot of water. It's a lot more work to start a plant than it is to just take care of it. And then picking plants that like your climate. So they will grow a lot better if they're kind of meant to grow in your spot. So that's where, especially if they're there all year round, that's where you actually look at the zone, what zone you're in, which you can look that up online. Just Google your location and it will tell you what zone you're in. And, you can just make sure that they actually like where you're putting them. So like I'm trying to grow watermelon this year just for fun. They're like half green. I have no idea if I'm going to get any watermelon out of it. You're supposed to have way warmer weather, but I had the spot and my daughter picked out the seed packet. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. That it's probably not going to do well. So it's just something that, if you're putting a lot of energy into a plant and then it doesn't even work out, or, it just doesn't do well. It's not as much fun. Taking breaks before you've overdone it is good. So if you're feeling tired and you just like, well, I just want to push through because I only have 3 more things to do. Then that might make you so tired that you can't, make your own lunch or, you want to, or get back to work, things like that. So you really want to be conscientious of like, this is not the only thing in the day. It is okay. Most of the time, everything's going to survive the night and, you can pick back up on that task the next day. Also, so having things up higher, like I just have one of those plastic tables outside, like from Costco. If you've been there, it's just those white plastic tables. You don't need a fancy potting bench, but it just brings it up so that you're not trying to kneel or squat down all the time. And then there is a kneeling bench. I think I have a picture of it later. So it's something that you can kneel on and it's got handles on the side to help you get up and down easier, just to save that energy. And then also you can flip it over and sit on it. So that way, if you're weeding or something or planting anything that you're doing on the ground more, you can sit and lean over to do that versus having to squat down. Also, if you're trying to do different things, like if you are planting some stuff in the ground or in a lower raised garden bed, then switching between activities is really helpful if you're able to. So maybe you plant 2 plants and then switch to watering. If you're watering with like a hose, then maybe you switch to doing that so you're standing up, that sort of thing. So just switching to lessen the amount of one type of work. Like if you're lifting things, right? Same thing. If you're lifting some plants to, like, if you have, especially if you do potted plants and you're trying to lift and move them, it helps to, do 1 or 2, but then take a break, work on something else and come back to it. So if temperature, we talked about working in the morning anyway, is usually better for plants. But if you aren't able to do that, or even if you are, you could save some things for the evening. So that way you're splitting things up. If it's too much work to do it all in the morning, then spread it out to the evening. That will help with energy. Also with temperature, because if you're working out in the sun, that's going to zap your energy a lot faster. And then working in the shade. So, that's also, of course, important in staying hydrated. If you are moving heavier things, using a wheelbarrow, even if it's, or a wagon, I find a wagon easier, or, a wheelbarrow with more than one wheel, because that can tip. So if you're moving pots, like potted plants, you could use a dolly and a strap. Anytime you're working with anything, the closer you can kind of keep it to the space, the better, because if you're reaching a lot, that's just using more energy and strength. So if you're kind of keeping everything close, then that's going to be easier. We talked about actually this. One thing I wanted to add, so for watering, if you are using a watering can, something I found is, obviously, if you have a larger can, that's heavier. So you have to think about that. You don't have to fill it as often. So that's helpful for not doing back and forth trips. But obviously, if it's pretty big and heavy, then that's going to use more energy and strength there, and can throw you off balance if you have balance issues. But also just thinking about when you're filling the can, especially if you're doing it several times. I have found that I like the ones that will actually stand on their own while you're filling them, because then I've got a hose that, or what is it called? The thing that goes on the hose that like you do the, yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. Yes. Okay, good. So I've got a long one. So that way it's great for putting into plants, like to get below the leaves anyway. But if you're filling up a bucket, then you can be standing up and filling up your watering can if it's on the ground or on a table. And so some of them I found just kind of topple over while I'm doing that. And so that's obviously not great, because then you have to squat down to hold it. So it's just little things like that that don't seem like a big deal maybe at the time can really add up. So just thinking about ways that you can conserve your energy is helpful. And same with hoses. So I like the thick, big hoses because it keeps them from kinking, but then they're a lot heavier. So we have one, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a cloth hose. And so the big complaint on those cloth hoses is just if they get holes in them. But if you can find one that's a good quality, I got mine at Costco. It's been holding up really well. I have no idea what brand it is, but if you can just find one that's a good quality, then that's light and it doesn't kink as easily. And it's just, yeah, it works out a lot better. Oh man.
Kyrstin, just an FYI, we've got 10 minutes, so I'm not sure if you want to do questions and whatever you want to do, but
that's a good point. I think I'm almost through these. So let me just cherry pick a couple. Yeah. So for weeding, we already covered most of this anyway. So this is a cool tool I just learned about. It's in the picture there. It's called the wire weeder. And so if you use a hoe for weeding at all, or there's another type too, just there's some heavier things that you could use for weeding, but this works pretty well with small weeds. So if you wait till they're huge, it doesn't work out very well. But if you do rows, or if you just like to do a perimeter, like if you don't have a raised garden bed, but it just helps with giving you a visual of where you're planting, then you can use the wire weeder, and it's pretty light. It's a lot lighter and easier to use. So that was a fun find. Pest care, I would say, like, taking care of, the bugs in the garden is nice for keeping your harvest up, but it's also a lot of work. So just something to think about is they are just plants, so sometimes it might just be worth pulling one out and, tossing it in the city compost if you have that. But also just knowing that there's a lot of ways to build up your soil with good health and everything over time to actually reduce those pests. So I guess my main message with that is like, don't let that stop you from gardening. There are ways to make it easier, especially over time. Okay, so this was the other assistive technology piece that there's lots of tools out there. So if you're having a hard time with something, just know that there's probably a tool out there to help you with that. So we can talk about some of that if anyone has questions about it. But then just to know, like, if this is overwhelming and too much stuff, which it probably is, like I'll send out the slides or something. We'll figure that out. Either you could email me or I can email you, whatever works. But that way you have the information written down. And then just know that just try something, and then you don't have to try everything. Just kind of pick one thing or pick one plant, and just to get started. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. What would you recommend if those of us that haven't started yet, what is an easy go-to plant?
I like herbs, because you can grow, they're pretty easy to grow most of the time, especially if you buy a start from, just from the store. So they come, or they're perennials most of the time too, so you don't have to keep rebuying them. And the more you harvest them, like, as long as you don't take off too much, like, you definitely want to look up like how to harvest it, to be the most benefit. But they'll actually grow bigger. So it's like, as you harvest it, you're actually helping it to be a better plant. So it's great. So it's very rewarding for that. And also, if you can dehydrate things in, like, you can either buy a dehydrator that's pretty cheap. It's like $30, I think, is how much I spent on mine. Or if your oven goes to a low enough temperature, or just hang drying herbs. So it's a very low cost way of actually preserving enough herbs for the whole year, which they're very expensive in the store. So that's what I got started with, because I was like, well, I'm not going to pay, $5 for like little sprigs of thyme when it's literally like a weed. So it will grow, it will sprawl out. So you want to use a container for a lot of those because they just grow so well.
I have a question too, Kyrstin.
Yeah.
Do you have like some type of like planters or tools that you recommend to conserve energy? Like, it's easier for them to reach or like to use, like any favorite tools that you found?
Yeah. So for the reaching part, like, especially if you can't get down in, into the, or onto the ground, that sort of thing. Those cloth pots, there's a lot of different names for them. They're like called air pots or things, but they're just a cloth round pot. They're nice because they aren't, without the edges, like without the plastic edges, the plants don't get root bound as easily. So you can still grow in them. But then you could put it up on something for like tools. If you're trying to reach without bending over, that sort of thing. There are long handled tools like that normally would be a short handle for in hand. There's some, if you're looking online, there's some that have like a ring around it if you have grip strength issues, or someone with grip strength issues. But I've tried that with somebody and I didn't really like it because it was just one size. Like, it wasn't an adjustable size. So it's like, unless your forearm is exactly that size, it doesn't work very well. I tried putting padding in it. It just didn't stay very well. So I don't know. Maybe I didn't figure out how to use it correctly, but I did not find that helpful. I'm trying to think what other.
Something that's worked for me was PVC pipe and
Yeah.
duct taping it to the normal tools, because I have a lot of vestibular issues and I just kind of made my own extension on things.
So you
That's
attach the pipes to the regular tools.
Yeah, and it, like the handle of the regular tool, I just lined up the cheap PVC pipe and just duct
Build it up.
taped it because I have trouble
awesome.
getting up and down.
Yeah. duct tape or like a hose bib thing. The if it's the small enough one, you can like put the hose bib piece over and like turn it. There's ones with like the bigger tabs to keep it together too. So that's pretty cool. And also PVC pipe. I forgot about one is like if you're doing bigger seeds like peas, you can just have the PVC pipe as a planter. So you're standing up and you just stick the hose into the ground a little bit, or the PVC pipe, and then stick the pea down in there and it will just shoot down to the ground exactly where you want it. And then you can just use the end of it to brush the dirt over it. So, it works well, and then you're not kneeling down for all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. This was so cool. I felt relaxed just thinking about getting out in that soil. There's so many studies about gardening and mental health and the just overall wellness. So this was really cool. I will post it to our YouTube channel. And if anybody would like the slides or has further questions, feel free to email me at info@biawa.org, or you've got Kyrstin, I apologize, Kyrstin's information on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a really nice day.